I remember, and I was crying, and I was like, no, I changed my mind. I don't want to do this. And I got up and I peeked my head out around the door, and I said, excuse me, I had my gown on, and I said, I changed my mind. I don't want to do this. And they said, it's too late. We're sorry. And so I was like, okay. And I sat down, and it would seem like forever for the doctor to finally come in. I have a little scar that's still on my hand because they like put you to sleep, like sedate you, and I had the little thing. It was like an IV, so that they could go. And in the end, right, it's like through this whole process, you just have the abortion, just get through it, because in the end, everything is going to be okay, right? You're going to come out of it, the problem's going to be solved, everything will be okay. Great. That's what I was waiting for. Get done with it. And afterwards, again, the way that I grew up, I was 3 years old, and I could take a shotgun, which is the way that people smoke marijuana. You like blow it in their face, one side of the joint into the other side of the joint, and you like blow it. By the time I was 6 years old, I could take a shotgun better than most grown people. So what did I know in life? My life, what I knew was do some drugs. That's what's going to make it all go away. Because when it was over, it didn't feel better. I didn't feel like everything was okay. I didn't understand why at that time, right? I can look back now, knowing what I know today. Hindsight is 20/20, and I can realize my conscience was fighting against itself. But I thought I was perfectly fine. I was having fun. I went right back out, having sex, drinking, doing drugs, all of these things, and becoming more promiscuous, right? You would think that with that kind of, again, I can't really explain the pain, but if you've had an abortion, and come to terms with it, you do. I didn't realize I was struggling with the fact that I was the mother of a dead baby, right? Because it's done, it's over with. There's not supposed to be a problem anymore. So fast forward, I was probably around 19, 20 years old, and I get pregnant again, quite promiscuous, so promiscuous I didn't know who the father was. Hence, I need to have this. I was like, I knew I didn't want to do an abortion again because it was horrible, and I was kind of coming to those terms, right? It was like, again, you're a little older, and I was like, oh, something doesn't seem right. So I just did all these people, they were like, oh, hey, you take these herbs, all of these different things, and you can make yourself have a miscarriage. And in my mind, still, that's not an abortion, not until I get older, right? And I did, and it worked. I took all of these herbs, I did some, stupid things, and I wound up having a miscarriage. Great. I was okay. Another bullet dodged, right? At that point, I did start thinking to myself, I got to change my life a little bit. I quit drinking before I was 21 years old, but I did continue doing drugs, and as that continued on, I just wanted to forget. I did not want to be thinking about my childhood and the things that happened there, but again, everything that's being compounded. Fast forward a little bit, I had my first kid when I was 24 years old, live birth. She is 21 today, and she's almost 22. And that was really the moment that I had to start dealing with things. Right? So I'm talking about all of these things as though I was going through them at that time, but I wasn't, right? I didn't understand any of it. I still was in a place of denial. I still was like, oh, well, if somebody should have an abortion, that's their right to have an abortion, right? I had one. I understood what was hey, I get it. So I have my first kid, and I'm like, oh, this is what I could have been feeling all along, and I had to start dealing with those feelings. And it really grew me up a lot. So fast forward, about 4 years later, I have another kid. I did not So my oldest daughter, I was in love again. Right? I loved her dad and thought he was the one and we were going to get married, and it didn't turn out that way. So I fast forward again about 4 years later, I got pregnant again, another father, right? So now I've been pregnant uh, 4 times, 4 different guys, and her dad, my middle one, her name is Leviticus, and her dad gave me money to have an abortion, but I didn't do it. But I contemplated it because I'm like, what am I doing? Right? I don't love this person. Again, a constant cycle, and and I want to get into like what happens. How do you just continue on this cycle? It doesn't make sense, right? To the normal person, you're like, so you didn't learn the first, second, third, fourth time, nothing, right? And I'm just going on. Fast forward again. So now I'm a single mom with 2 kids, trying to figure my life out. Almost 30 years old. What am I doing? I get pregnant again. And guess what? Do you think it was the same guy as one of the first two? Oh, no, it was not. Different guy. Third kid, living child, 3 different dads. Again, and at this point, I'm saved. I know Jesus by now. Okay? I have a relationship with Jesus. And not just like a little relationship with Jesus. Like I know the Word of God. People look up to me. They are like my friends because the only people that I really knew were drug addicts and alcoholics and so they're looking at me like, oh, Aisha, hey, that's the way out. Oh, this Jesus person. And I'm like, now I'm pregnant. This is what they're going to think Christianity is. And I was like, I can't have this baby. So this is my, you know, my youngest. And I'm like, I can't have this baby. No, if people know that that's what I did, oh no. And I'm thinking in my mind, well, I know Jesus now, and he loves me. And you know what? He's going to forgive me. If I have this abortion, God will forgive me. And you know what? He would have, because he loves us. And that was my mentality. I said, I just got to go get this done. So University Planned Parenthood, right down there. Go in, I have the appointment. They check me out, blah, blah, blah. Yep, you're pregnant. Okay, you're going to come back. This was like on a Thursday or so. I had just moved back here to Rochester. I'm living in my best friend's basement with my 2 kids, trying to find a job because I was trying to get out of the mess that I had put myself back into. It wasn't really a mess. It's just you can't live in Orlando, Florida and not have a really good job because the cost of living is atrocious. So I was like, I'm just coming back to Rochester at this point. My best friend, she's like, okay, you can stay in my basement until you get a job, get on your feet, blah, blah, blah. She's married. She has 3 kids. I'm living in her basement. 2 weeks later, I find out I'm pregnant. Yeah, no, and she's all Jesusified too, and we're all like, yay, we love Jesus, and I'm like, yay, Jesus. She's going to Bethel Christian Fellowship at the time. Never been there before. That Sunday would have been the first Sunday I went, but she knew that I loved Jesus, and so I was like, if I say I don't want to go to church, she's going to say to me, why not? What's wrong? So I was like, I got a plan, right? I had a plan. And my plan was I will go to church. I won't pay attention to the sermon in case it's something convicting because I'm going to have this abortion on Monday. But I don't need to be talked out of it. Nobody's going to talk me out of it. It's not going to happen. I love Jesus. He will forgive me. Go. All right. Going to church, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to keep my head down. And then I'm like, okay, Lord, you know what? I will give you one more chance to talk me out of it because, you can't. I was very sure. Okay. Right, true. I was positive. There was no way that God was talking me out of this. But I wanted to make sure that I gave him every chance so that it would be his fault in the end. Right? It was like, it can't be my fault. It's got to be his fault because I gave him every opportunity to do the right thing and he couldn't figure out what to do. That was my plan. Do you think that turned out well? It didn't. It did for me, but it didn't for the evil abortion side. So I go up the sermon gets done, and I go in there, and I tell Pastor Ron Domino, and I say, oh, excuse me, the sermon had nothing to do with anything. I have no idea what the sermon was because I literally didn't listen, and I know it had nothing to do that would be convicting you of life. I just had my plan. I walked straight up to him, and I said, excuse me, because like in Protestant churches, right, they have altar calls. You can talk to the pastor afterwards. So I walked up, and I said, yes. So I have an abortion plan for tomorrow. If you think you have anything that you can say to talk me out of it, go ahead. And he went white as a ghost. He was like, what? And I was like, yeah, you got anything for me? And he was like, hold on one second. And he went and got a woman who's now a dear friend. Her name was Candy Giles. She came. She pulled me off to the side. She's like, will you talk to a friend of mine? Da, 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 da. And I was like, sure, whatever. So I wound up talking to Terry and Jerry Crawford. They're part of Rescue Rochester. And that Monday, right? So my appointment for my abortion was at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. They were like, hey, meet me. They were like, meet me at 10:30. I'm like, okay, I'll meet. We met at Bill Gray's. We had this conversation, and they started talking, and it was unlike anything I had ever heard before. It was hope. It was, Jerry Crawford was like a salesman. He had all of these like rebuttals like already planned out. Every time I would say something, he'd be like, well, yeah, but then, this, but this and this. And I was like, yeah, I've already heard all of these things because I was kind of pro-life at this point. I was like pro-life. I was that pro-life person where I think it's wrong except for me, right? Right? That was the kind of pro-life person I was at that point. I was like, I know it's wrong, but you never know. So I go in, I'm moving forward, and then he gets to a point, and he said, again, these people don't know me from Adam. I've never met them before. And they said to me, so, they're listening to my, they said, so basically you're saying that you don't want anybody to know that you were pregnant because you're embarrassed and you want to disappear. And I said, well, yeah, pretty much. And they said, if that's if that's it, they said, we have people that will adopt your baby. They will let you live with them until everything is over, if that's what you want. You and your 2 children, you can have the baby, they will adopt it, and you can go back to your life. And I was like, that's Hallmark movie stuff, right? That's not real life. People don't really do those types of things. And they said, yes, they do, because your baby matters. And I was blown away. And I was like, okay. And they got me. And I said, okay, I will. That's what I'm going to do. I said, I can do that. And so I met this couple. They were going to adopt my baby, Mary Beth and Blair Powley. And we go, and I get to know them. I finally tell the guy, hey, I'm pregnant, and I'm going to give the baby up. Because he has no say, right? Because men have no say in anything. That's our mindset. So I go, wind up having around 8, right at the end, right? I didn't name her anything because I was just going to give her away. I was like, this is a 2-parent home. Everything that I would ever want for a kid, this is it. And so I was like, okay. And then as I'm talking to them, they're all still encouraging me to keep my baby. These people who want to adopt my baby are saying, if you want to keep your baby, you can keep your baby. It's like, we're here to help you, open adoption, keep the baby. And I was just like, what is this? What manner of Christian are these? Right? Because I'm Christian at this point, had been for a while, I had been saved, but this still was not what I hear from the news. This isn't what they tell me that pro-lifers are like. So I'm continuing, and I'm like, okay. So I wind up keeping I was like, right at the end, I'm like, will you be mad if I keep her? I'm going to keep her. And mostly the father, I told him, and he was, I was going to tell them I didn't know who the dad was so that I didn't have to deal with it when you go through the adoption process. But, I was like, that's wrong, right? That's wrong. Having the abortion is okay, and that's forgivable, but telling that, I don't know, right? There's no reason in our minds. It doesn't make sense. It's these outside voices that come in that say reason and hope and truth to us in these emotional states that help us to work through whatever crisis that we're going through at that time. So I keep her. They're like, yeah, if you want to keep her. And they let me stay with them. So I had my baby. The people that were going to adopt him let me live in their house for like 2 weeks, so they helped me take care of the other two while I could just rest and be with my baby. And then they let me go. And you know what? The most fantastic part of it, which is what got me, all of this is what brought me here today. The most amazing part of what God did was Mary Beth and Blair Powley are some of my dearest friends. They didn't look at me like, "Ooh, you poor little wretched soul, look who I helped out. Oh, no," right? They were like, "Oh, we like you. It's okay." And they're my friends, and we have dinner, and our kids hang out. And our kids are like, "Oh, we were almost brother and sister," right? So they're like, "We're brother and sister." Terry and Jerry. Jerry walked me down the aisle when I got married. This is my rainbow mama and papa. That's what I call them. They're like my best friends, two of my best friends. How does that happen? Because the world tells us, oh, those pro-lifers, you only care about the baby. Just make sure it doesn't get killed. And then once it comes out, they don't care about you. That's not true. It's not real. So again, when we're going back to this piece of truth, right? If you look at those two stories, I don't know if you can see what the big difference was. But when I went back and I looked at it, like, why didn't I, right? Because I was still obviously a hot mess. If I'm still right, pregnant, young, not married. Pregnant, old, not married. It's still the same thing, right? So there's still an amiss that was there. But the difference was the hope that was spoken into my life. That there were people there that were saying, hey, it's okay, right? You think everything is a mess, but I see something that's bigger. Isn't that what God does to us? He tells us, and He speaks into our life, and He speaks truth into our life. If there isn't truth, then the enemy wins with all of his lies. If we're going to cultivate a culture of life and acceptance, we have to do it with truth. What is truth? Truth is Christ. Christ is hope, is love, is peace. If we're not doing that, then we're allowing, right, the enemy to come in with all of these lies, and he wins every time. Every time he says something like, you don't care about these women, he's like, well, I do care about the women. I care about what they want. They may only need me to speak into their life for a moment, and then they're off and they're good. They may not need anything else. They just might have needed a little hump to get over. Others may need constant help, right, for 4, 5, 10 years, and then want to be bye-bye, see you later. Whatever it is that they need, we can walk alongside them. And that's one of the great things that I've studied in 2020. There's Margaret House, right? And there's these other things that are all happening where you're seeing people come out of the woodwork, where you're seeing people say, hey, I'm not going to be silent anymore. Not only am I not going to be silent about my testimony, because sure, it is my dirty secret. It is. It's terrible. Who wants to go around and say, yeah, I had 3 abortions, 3 kids, 6 baby daddies, and who wants to do that? But it's by the word of our testimony. And I'll tell you, when I was sitting there in that church, afraid to talk to anyone, a church should be the last place that we should be afraid to tell anybody any of our sins. Shame on us, church. If you've had an abortion and you're not forgiven and set free, you know what that means? That there's probably a woman that you sat next to at one point in time that needed to hear your story. That's the hope of Christ. So as we heal ourselves, and I think that's part of that wave that is missing within the pro-life movement, right? We have all these different pieces, and then I play chess. I love chess. I don't even know what my time is at. Oh, good, I'm good on time. I got like 10 minutes. I put a timer on. And so